The Legislative Handbook is a general guide to provide legislators with a brief summary of the Kentucky General Assembly and various processes. Please note that rules and procedures may change and tend to differ between chambers.
This set of videos covers the information in the Legislative Handbook, published by the Legislative Research Commission and available online. This particular video covers Chapter 1, dealing with the Kentucky General Assembly. The development of representative government in America covers more than 3 centuries. A basic concept of our system is the coordinate position of the 3 branches of government: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. This separation of powers has never been absolute, but the process of determining public policy, establishing the means for its implementation, and reviewing its administration remains the business of the legislature. The executive branch enforces and administers the laws. The governor also is assigned some powers directly related to the legislative authority of the General Assembly. The governor is directed to give the General Assembly information on the state of the Commonwealth and to recommend for its attention such measures as may be deemed expedient. This responsibility applies particularly to the executive branch's biennial budget recommendation, which the governor is required by law to submit to the General Assembly. The governor may veto bills except bills proposing amendments to the Constitution of Kentucky, and may veto particular line items in appropriation bills. The governor may convene extraordinary sessions. The judicial branch is empowered to interpret laws and to declare them unconstitutional.
Legislative power. The Constitution vests the entire legislative power of the Commonwealth of Kentucky in the General Assembly. The basic job of the legislature is to make the state's laws, to determine the duties and services of the government, to provide for their execution, and to levy taxes and appropriate funds for their support. The General Assembly represents the people of the state. It is the primary channel through which citizens hold their government responsible. The legislature sets the public policy for the state. The power to enact laws is restricted only by federal treaties and federal and state constitutions. No laws, except those relating to a few specified matters, may take effect upon the approval of any authority except the General Assembly. The fields in which the General Assembly must legislate are defined by the Constitution. However, it may also legislate in any other areas not expressly prohibited by the Constitution.
Other powers. The legislature's job is not limited to lawmaking. It may impeach the governor or any other civil officer for misdemeanor in office. The Senate is not subject to a limit on the length of sessions while sitting as a court of impeachment. The General Assembly also judges contested elections for governor and lieutenant governor. It has exclusive power to initiate changes in the Constitution by proposing amendments or providing for a referendum on calling a constitutional convention. The Constitution provides for legislative oversight of the executive branch. The Secretary of State must present to the requesting House a register of all of the governor's official acts, upon request of either House. Reports of investigations of the treasurer's and auditor's accounts must be transmitted to the legislature. The governor is required to secure legislative confirmation of certain appointments.
Legislative sessions. Regular sessions of the General Assembly are limited to 60 legislative days every even-numbered year and 30 legislative days every odd-numbered year. A legislative day is defined as a calendar day, excluding Sundays, legal holidays, and any day on which neither house meets. The even-year session convenes on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in January and may not continue beyond April 15 of that year. The odd-year session also convenes on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in January, usually recesses after 1 week, then reconvenes on the first Tuesday in February, and must adjourn by March 30. During the first part of the odd-year session, members elect legislative leaders, adopt rules of procedure, and organize committees. They may introduce and consider legislation at any time during an odd or even-year session. The Constitution allows the governor to convene the General Assembly by proclamation on extraordinary occasions to consider only those subjects stated in the proclamation, or call. However, The General Assembly has certain inherent powers that may be exercised even if not in the call, such as the power to investigate, inspect, or petition.
Membership. The Constitution specifies that there are 38 senators and 100 representatives. Senators must be at least 30 years old and must have resided in Kentucky for 6 years immediately preceding their election, the last year in their district. Representatives must be at least 24, with 2 years residence in the state, the last year in their district. Each house is the sole judge of the elections and qualifications of its members.
Districts. The Constitution directs the General Assembly to redistrict every 10 years. Districts must be as nearly equal in population as possible. A 1994 Kentucky Supreme Court decision recognized that counties must be split to achieve population equality among legislative districts, but found that county integrity should be balanced with population equality to accommodate both principles to the extent permissible under federal law. The counties forming a district must be contiguous, according to Section 33 of the Kentucky Constitution.
Election and terms. The primary election for nominating members of the General Assembly is held on the first Tuesday after the third Monday in May of even-numbered years. Persons seeking their party's nomination for election to the General Assembly must file nominating papers with the Secretary of State not later than the first Friday following the first Monday in January preceding the May primary. The deadline for filings by independent candidates is the first Tuesday after the first Monday in June preceding the regular election. Candidates are required to report periodically to the Registry of Election Finance on the financing of their campaigns and are required to file a statement of financial interests with the Legislative Ethics Commission. The nomination or election of a candidate who fails to comply with campaign finance filing requirements shall be void. Candidates who are unopposed or who receive a plurality of votes in the primary receive a certification of nomination. Their names are placed on the ballot for the regular election, which is held the first Tuesday after the first Monday of the following November. Representatives are elected for 2-year terms. Senators are elected to 4-year terms, with half the Senate elected every 2 years. Senators and representatives begin their terms on the first day of January immediately succeeding their elections. A legislator resigning during the interim between sessions writes a letter of resignation to the governor. During a session, a senator addresses his or her resignation to the President of the Senate, a representative to the Speaker of the House. When a vacancy occurs in either house during a session, the presiding officer issues a writ directing the proper sheriff to hold a special election on a designated date. If the General Assembly is not in session, the governor issues a writ calling a special election. No person can be appointed to the General Assembly.
Rules. The General Assembly is organized and operates according to definite procedures established by the rules of each chamber. These rules are only effective for the duration of the session for which they are adopted. These rules define the order in which the business of the Senate or the House of Representatives is conducted. The various motions that may be offered to accomplish that business. Duties of various leaders and employees, including the presiding officers. Types of committees and their jurisdiction and duties. Hours of meeting. Attendance and decorum of members. Methods of voting, and other general procedural matters. The entire legislative operation depends on the rules. Each chamber adopts its rules by way of a simple resolution. According to parliamentary law and precedent, each house of a legislative body is the sole judge of its rules. Rules may be suspended by the affirmative vote of a majority of the members elected, 20 senators or 51 representatives. The suspension, however, must be for a stated purpose and ends at completion of that purpose.